I'd like to start this presentation with this quote from futurist David Thornburg. Any teacher that can be replaced by technology deserves to be. I think that's very important to keep in mind during this presentation because it's really the teachers that bring their experiences to the classroom and make learning come alive for students. I call this work the 3 phases of educational technology, and it actually comes out of my own work with staff development around my district or at the school that I'm working at. And it's typically just some ways that teachers tend to move through technology as they begin to implement it in their classroom. The danger with presenting anything like this in terms of phase 1, 2, 3, or ABC is that it seems to set up some type of a hierarchy. And that's not really my intent at all. One phase is not any more important than any other phase. Again, it just seems to be as teachers move through technology in their classroom, it just seems to be some of the ways that they begin to implement it in a systematic way. It's not that one phase is better than the other. It's appropriate in some cases and maybe not appropriate in other lessons. Phase 1 is often where most teachers start, and usually what this involves is some type of a dynamic presentation given to a classroom. It simply replaces a chalkboard or whiteboard or an overhead. It's often teachers using their own computer with some type of a multimedia presentation station. It can involve the use of interactive whiteboards. It can involve PowerPoint and Keynote presentations, video presentations, really anything that captures students' attention with light. Remember the old adage, what you see is what you get? We can kind of turn that around here and suggest that you don't get what you don't see. So often this is a great way for teachers to build background knowledge for students. Teachers often move into phase 2 technology once they've become comfortable with phase 1. And it also dictates, of course, that you have computers for students. In phase 2, typically what happens is that textbooks are replaced with electronic forms of information. So in other words, students are using technology to access content knowledge. In many cases, the lesson is very traditional. Sometimes the outcome can be a traditional paper and pencil type of an outcome, such as a research paper or worksheet. But the key is that students are using online sources to access the content knowledge. Often this is in the form of web searches, can be web quests, but not necessarily, wiki spaces, online encyclopedias, and of course the World Wide Web and all the information that it offers for students. Phase 3 integration is quite a bit different, and it is in many ways a little bit more advanced because it requires a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of what happens in a typical classroom. Whereas phase 1 and phase 2 are often ways to take technology and infuse it into more traditional lessons, phase 3 really begins to change the way teachers teach. With phase 3 technology integration, what we really are talking about is how to get our content standards infused into 21st century skills, which namely are communication, collaboration, and creation. How do we do that in a typical classroom today using technology? In phase 3, we need to begin to think about students in a slightly different role. We have to start thinking about students as producers of information rather than simply consumers of information. There are many tools out there today that enable students to build creative and possibly collaborative projects. The key to this is that there is some type of product at the end. And the product can be a very traditional type of research paper, but it can also be a movie, it can be a podcast, it can be some type of presentation built with the various presentation tools that exist. The key is that there's a product. The second part of phase 3 involves students as publisher, and this is where things really begin to change. That student needs to publish that product to a wider audience. Traditionally, work has been turned into teachers, and teachers turn the work back to students, and that's really an audience of one. Sometimes it's shared within a classroom, but what we're talking about here is really utilizing Web 2.0 methodologies and mentalities to reach a wider audience. Now that audience can be a classroom, a school, a district, or quite possibly the world. There are many types of software available out there that allow students to publish. Now obviously there are some rules that are enforced among many districts, and each district needs to begin to figure out exactly what it will allow students to publish or what it won't. But the key is that we need to bring student work to a wider audience. This really engages students. They really want their work to be seen by a wider audience. Once work has been produced and published, this sets up student as audience and student as peer reviewer. Again, thinking about Web 2.0 methodologies, work can be commented upon. Students can actually act as reviewers, and if this is structured the right way through use of rubrics and other types of assessment models, we have a built-in student assessment model. So we have a feedback cycle that is closed now. Student as producer, student as publisher, student as audience, and student as peer reviewer. Again, this is incredible for student engagement, and it really begins to get through to these 21st century skills of communication, collaboration, and creation. And again, what we need to do as teachers is begin to take our content standards and build them around and into these types of projects where students get to actually share what they've done. Again, these phases are not necessarily meant to be hierarchical. Often one lesson can in fact have all three phases built within it. It just is ways that technology can be embedded into the curriculum, and a systematic approach of thinking about how to actually build technology into content standard. Please feel free to contact me about any ideas or challenges or criticisms involved with this presentation. Let me know what you think.